I am really honored to be here today with these two. I think they're two of the greatest innovators we have in our nation, and this is a terrific presentation that you can look forward to. I'm just going to say a few words in advance about the Self-Represented Litigation Network, or SRLN for short, because we can all stumble all through those syllables forever. It was started in 2001 by Richard Zorza, and it is a network of court professionals, lawyers, legal aid folks, librarians, technologists, researchers, you name it, anybody in the community that is interested in access to justice for the self-represented, who now make up consistently about 80% of the population in the civil courts. And this network, if you're not familiar with it, it is available for you to become involved in. There's a lot of idea and knowledge sharing. We're in the process of a web page redesign, and our hard launch will be at CTC in September. And so I urge you to go to srln.org in September if you want to see a new and jazzy website and get involved. And if you want to see the great before and after picture, go now and then go then. And I want to talk a little bit about a project that we're working on, but actually there's somebody in the audience I really want to acknowledge for why I got into this business, and also why I thought these guys were so important. And that's Alice Roberts, who's sitting in the back. Wave your hand. She was the clerk of court when I started the Self-Help Center in Alaska. And the partnership, here I was some lawyer brought in from outside to work in the trial courts. We had no lawyers in the trial courts. I could have been boxed off and not really gotten any help or support or training or education. Alice opened her office to me, let me learn about court operations through the eyes of a clerk, and to design our self-help services to support not just the clerks in Anchorage, but we were able to design services that supported clerks across the state. That is the kind of thinking that the network really embraces, integrated systems, and so we encourage all of you to join us in those ideas. One of the big projects I'm working on right now is an inventory of self-help services throughout the nation, first on a statewide level and then going down to the county level. The inspiration to do this project was about a year ago, the ABA released a census of how many self-help centers there are in the country, and they came up with about 500. The problem is that a self-help center that had, let's say, 5 or 8 staff and was doing a whole panoply of services was being counted as one center, the same way a self-help center who might just have a flyer they distributed in the corner of a law library. So we realized we needed to go down into a much more granular level and start looking at self-help services. It's been about 10 years now since we've been experimenting as a nation with self-help services, and so we have quite a variety. And as I did that inventory, a pattern emerged, and you're going to hear about this pattern. Renee really inspired me to see this pattern because her design process was around this pattern where we have 3 tiers of service, and the first tier being very one-directional services, a website, a pamphlet, something somebody just reads. It's a fairly passive delivery system. Tier 2 services are bidirectional. It goes back and forth. There's some kind of give and take between the consumer and the information. That could be talking to a clerk. It could be calling a hotline. It could be going to a self-help center. It could be interactive web education. It can be a variety of things, but it's marked by back and forth. And Tier 3 services are where the rubber hits the road. It's where we connect legal information to legal advice. It's where we create the bridges and the triage systems so that that very small population that really does need legal advice can get it. And we build that into our overall ecosystem in our communities. And we'll put some information up about that on the web, but I urge you to kind of think of that framework as you're listening to both of these speakers, because they were able to create a fully robust ecosystem in their courts without having to create a new department. So you're in for a treat. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Just a little housekeeping issue. All of the materials are on the NACM website. It's perhaps in a place where you might not have looked. And that's in the speaker section under speaker materials. You might think it'd be under the agenda. It is not. So you can find this, all these materials there. This is my court email. You can always email me there. You can also get me at renee@nacmnet.org. And I want to also just make a distinction. I'm no longer working in Pittsburgh, and this project is one I completed while I was there. So I'm reporting out on a project that is still ongoing, but not one that I'm necessarily super involved with any longer. So I want to talk to you about the practical way to do this. I'm not going to talk to you really a lot today about theory. I'm going to talk to you about how I went through this process and how the court in Pittsburgh went through this process so that you can maybe model some of those steps or think about whether they're going to work for your court. There were tears, I'm not going to lie, so be prepared. So we had undergone a comprehensive strategic planning process, and through that process we learned that we might not have been doing a great job at serving self-represented litigants. So I have for you up here some of the questions that were asked and how they panned out in the survey responses. And so we pretty much had a unanimous decision that we were not doing a great job of representing or of serving our self-represented litigants. And that was in all three of the different groups of individuals that we had surveyed. Similarly, one of the programs that all of our survey respondents really wanted to see was services for self-represented litigants. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how then we went about, after seeing those survey responses, being responsive to those survey responses. So we did develop a task force within the court, as well as engaging some partners and our justice partners. So my recommendation to you is that you, while it can be uncomfortable to engage our justice partners, to really think about who has a stake in this project and then bring them to the table. So we included the Bar Association, we included the Women's Center and Shelter, we included some internal a lot of our internal stakeholders. And this is an urban jurisdiction, so the bureaucracy can be magnificent. So we had a lot of internal stakeholders. We included judges. And then what we were doing was not novel. So that's another important thing to think about. There are other places that did this well before we did. And so we embarked on a project to review some of those larger ones, especially ones that had similar population and size to us. So similar demographics. And we really came across Minnesota was probably the closest one to ours. But we did do, thank you to all of these jurisdictions, and you might not remember talking with me because it's been a number of years now. But we really took a lot of our model from the Hennepin County jurisdiction. Okay, so then we decided that, well, I didn't decide this. And I'm glad that someone stopped me from doing this, from doing what I wanted to do. I'm a big picture thinker, so I'm that person who's going to say, no, let's just blow it up, start over, and we'll just do everything at once. So I wanted to automate right away. I wanted to incorporate every subject matter area right away, and I wanted to do all of the divisions, not just the family division. And we didn't do that. We didn't even begin to do that. So what we did was first take note of what our major issues were. And so one of the ways we determined that we really needed to engage in this process was the idea that we were going to implement some mandatory e-filing in the family court. And then we realized we couldn't do that because most of our population were litigants who were not capable of managing mandatory e-filing. And when I say capable, I don't mean that they didn't have the intellectual capacity to do that. I mean that they didn't have the infrastructure to do that. And we needed to be able to make sure that we could accommodate all of our clients, especially the largest demographic. So you will see I'm using a outdated phrase on this slide. It is no longer pro se. We don't use Latin for self-represented litigants. But we had a program that we had been using to serve our self-represented litigant population prior to the implementation of the Self-Help Center. And so let me talk to you a little bit about what that program looked like. We partnered with our local law schools. We were fortunate enough in Pittsburgh to have two, the University of Pittsburgh, yay, and Duquesne, boo. So they came into our courthouse 2 mornings a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. They were there for a couple hours. They served however many clients that they could serve on a walk-in basis, first come, first serve. They could serve about 20 a day. We would have 80 line up. It was like they were getting concert tickets. They were lining up around the building, trying to get there at 6 in the morning. Couldn't get in the building at 6 in the morning because you're not allowed in the building till 8 in the morning. And they're bringing their children and all of their witnesses because sometimes they believe they're going to have their hearing that day. So it was really inhumane. So we decided we needed to really revamp that. But that was what we had. I mean, before we had nothing before that. So certainly that was a step up. So our goal was to start with that process and reform that process, which most of these individuals were coming for assistance with custody petitions, so we pretty much incorporated all of our custody operations into the Self-Help Center first. And then thereafter, we were going to do all family division matters, which includes divorce and domestic violence issues. And then we were going to move forward onto more of the civil operations with the final goal of automating everything so it could be 24/7 online. And I was giving them a bone by saying we'll do this phase-in process, but I was like, we will automate simultaneously. So that was the goal. So Catherine talked a little bit about what our process is, and it is that tiered level of service. This is for court managers, differentiated case management with people. So for those individuals that really did know what they wanted, they just needed a little bit of guidance on where the forms are or what does this term mean so that I can put in the right answer on this form. We did workshops, and we did workshops a couple of times a week. We staggered them in the morning and the afternoon. We did have you can make an appointment to come to a workshop, or you could walk in. We certainly did have a room capacity issue. We were fortunate that our law library, which in Pittsburgh we had a 7-building urban campus, and so no matter what, litigants were walking from a couple buildings. So our law library was in a neighboring building. We were able to use computers there, and clients were able to navigate our website together with a facilitator, as well as navigate the forms together with a facilitator. And so that's the workshop concept. For those people that they've got a lot of stuff going on in their case, because custody is never just one thing. And there's usually a lot of other family division issues that go with that. So for someone who has a lot of issues that's going on, and they really just need that one-on-one attention, which is what we were providing everyone before, we were able to give them appointments or on a walk-in basis work with our options counselors, which are court staff, non-lawyer court staff, and their charge is to provide procedural guidance, not legal advice. And we did do some extensive training regarding that concept. I know that was another kind of issue that you might want to tackle at the outset is people don't believe that you can actually train individuals to not provide legal advice. Lawyers and judges especially do not believe that you can train someone to not provide legal advice. And you can very easily. Mr. Grecian, who's in the audience, has provided a lot of literature on this topic, so I encourage you to reach out and get that information. And then for those litigants who really needed legal advice or just wouldn't leave without it, because you will have those individuals too that also don't believe they are getting good service without meeting with a lawyer, we did continue our partnership with our 2 law schools, and this helped to also foster that, that unified sense of purpose. So we weren't taking business away from either our lawyers or our law schools. We were still providing that clinical opportunity to the law schools, which I can speak from personal experience really is one of the most invaluable portions of your law school training, is having the opportunity to work directly with real live clients. We also then, in those times when the law schools aren't in session or aren't able to provide the service, we partnered with our local bar association to provide pro bono opportunities for them to work in our legal advice clinic. Malpractice insurance was covered by the bar association for attorneys because they were providing a pro bono service, and the clinical program has an adjunct professor that oversees the students. So the legal advice clinic is where these litigants are actually able to get real legal advice. And this actually improved the experience for our law students especially. Before, they were getting every client. Not every client has a novel legal issue. Now they're getting the clients that really need legal advice or are really difficult. So those are 2 different experiences, both valuable. Really difficult legal issues are teaching them how to manage those difficult legal issues, doing the research, learning what the law is about. Really difficult clients is teaching them how their real life is going to be. So, and sometimes you get both. So Catherine also said, my charge was to do this with as little cost as possible. So I repurposed people, repurposed facilities. The only cost that I did purchase was a one-time, non-recurring furniture cost for the front waiting room. Everything else was repurposed furniture. I'm hoping that they eventually built in the budget to get some new desks for those options counselors. But this is the room I was given. It's an arrow. Very difficult for people flow. There's where everyone's going to check in. So that's our counter. That's where our first intake is. We had 3 intake clerks. 2 would work here. 1 would work at our customer service desk that's in the front of the building. And then that person would be charged with directing people back to the self-help center or wherever else they actually needed to be. This is our waiting room, and you'll see there's some on the side there too. And then back here is where you'd meet with your options counselors. This allowed the intake clerks to avoid people just running back there. And then this is where our computer kiosks are for the automation portion. So the idea is that an intake clerk could identify what kind of level of service these individuals will need and either direct them to the kiosk to work on their petitions themselves or get them set up to go to an options counselor. Again, this is just one last compendium of how the client is moving through the process. We talked a little bit about the workshops. It's a classroom-style interaction meant to reach a lot of people at once with similar issues. So we kind of tried to pick big issues. So we picked the Informa Pauperis petition, which is the I don't have any money to pay for this petition, or the, and we also picked the basic custody petition. So in Pennsylvania, you can file for primary custody, shared custody, or partial custody or visitation. So what we did in that classroom-style interaction for the fee waiver petition was really talk to individuals about what these categories mean. So the fee waiver petition was developed by a Supreme Court Rules Committee. It has things on there like how much dividends do you have? If you can't afford your filings, you likely don't have dividends or know what they are. I barely know what those are. So, and I don't think I have them. So, we walked clients through that, helped them navigate what those terms mean, and also reminded them that they should be putting expenses on there like normal household expenses because those are allowed to be considered in the weighted analysis of income versus expenses. For the custody stuff, what we did was talk about what each category meant so that individuals had the opportunity then to choose which type of custody they wanted after they had all of the information. And also we talked about the process because depending on what type of custody petition you filed in Pittsburgh, you might go on a different track. And so sometimes the process in those tracks can be barriers. And you might either not want to spend that much time, you might not want to spend that much money, you might not want to go through some of the steps in the process. So just to give people that information before they get to the end and realize that's not what I wanted, I need to start over again. The options counseling is completed by a professional level staff, so not a manager, not a supervisor, but also not a clerical level staff. We did a ton of training for these individuals because I told you we repurposed staff. So this wasn't any one person's responsibility before. So before we opened the doors of the Self-Help Center, we did a solid month of training every court day for these individuals. We talked about the process. We did actual process training. We did some legal training. But we also did customer service training. We did de-escalation training. We talked about identifying mental illness so that we could give proper referrals, identifying individuals that may be intoxicated in the courthouse, and how to refer them appropriately to get those services before we provide assistance. We also talked about safety and security training. The Arrow doesn't have a back door. So that's an issue and for security. So the only way to get out is the same way you came in. And so that was a big issue for security. So we did do some of that training as well. The options counselor, if they're working with the client, they realize, I can't help this client without providing legal advice. They can refer them to the law student or the bar association. The client themselves may also say that they are not, this is not sufficient. So let me go to an attorney. Okay. And then partnership, partnership, partnership. This is how we sold the project, partners. Okay, but don't forget your internal partners, because I did. I expected that if I got the community to think this was a great thing, that of course everyone in my court would think this was a great thing. That is wrong. And it's also territorial. So remember that you may be stepping on someone's toes that you don't realize. You may realize you're stepping on someone's toes and not care. But you definitely need to also have those discussions internally and outside of your steering committee meetings, because that's really not a great forum to have those internal conflicting discussions. And that was the primary reason any process was delayed, was because of lack of internal buy-in. Okay, so I just want to move through this fairly quickly because I'm done. But we were able to help over double the number of clients. So we were helping 20 clients a day, 2 days a week. By the end, we were helping more than double of the clients. 909 clients was a 3-month total, the first 3 months. We also learned that people that were asking to have their fees waived were not qualifying for our legal clinic, which had an indigency requirement, which meant people thought they couldn't pay but actually could under the standards in the law in Pennsylvania. Just was kind of an interesting piece of information. Those are issues that are weighed by judges, which can be just a training opportunity. Okay, and then the next item that we did was automation, which was the A2J author program, and we did that simultaneously. If you have any questions for me now, we can take them, or we can take them at the end. Okay, Mike.
Good afternoon. I normally talk fast, and we lost a little time, so get ready. Hang on. Court-based help center, the Bronx Family Court. We opened a court help center in July 13th. There was a vision of our Deputy Chief Administrative Judge, Fern Fisher. Everybody may know Judge Fisher. She's also in charge of the access. The great thing about this is when you walk into a court, we got petition rooms, we got clerk's offices, we got docketing rooms. Everybody calls it something else, legal service area, whatever. You walk in, you see the word help, you're going to be attracted to it. You know, we like to give out information, but sometimes, you know, somebody once said brevity is the soul of wit. All right, if you want to get somebody's attention, do it short term. We're talking about Twitter. Everybody's using Twitter accounts now, 145 characters. My kids listen to Vine. Anybody hear about Vine? 6-second videos, right? And they're sharing information that way. People's attention span's getting shorter. Do you see this? And actually, just to tell you, Judge Fisher actually drew this on a piece of paper and then sent it over to tech staff to do it. But so that's now the logo. There's actually a logo. And every courthouse that has a help center in New York State has this logo posted outside it or using it to direct people to a help center. We wanted to create a comprehensive help center to take everything into account, all the legal informational needs. Why did the Bronx need a help center? First thing I say, this is my #1 talking point. Basically, first off, we had the most judicial filings of any family court in the state of New York, the Bronx County. Even though it's the 4th largest in terms of population county of New York City, it had the most filings. We're 4th. Brooklyn, for instance, Bronx has about 1.3 to 1.4 million people residing in its county. In comparison to Brooklyn, which we call Kings County, has 4 million people, yet the Bronx files more judicial filings than Brooklyn. It's also the poorest county in New York State. To tell you the truth, according to the 2010 U.S. Census, if I asked everybody in this room which city is proud to host the poorest congressional district in the entire United States, I doubt anybody would guess it's New York City. The great New York City of which I grew up on, according to the 2010 U.S. Census, the Congressional District, 17th Congressional District by Jose Serrano, is the poorest in the entire nation. So the great New York City, where we wear a chip on our shoulder, within walking distance of some of the richest neighborhoods up on the Upper West Side, is the poorest congressional district. 1 out of every 2 children and 1 out of every 3 children in the South Bronx lives at or below the poverty level. It also has a large non-speaking English, non-English speaking population. Over 52, about 52% of the population speaks a language other than English at home. We have a large immigrant. We also have the most children in New York City, although again, we're the 4th largest, in terms of population, we have the 4th largest population in New York City. There's only 5 counties in New York City, but yet we have the most children under the age of 18 residing in our county. It was a tough county. We had an old building, difficult to navigate, poor service. Actually, when we started there, it wasn't only a county crisis, it was a courting crisis, because people they were overwhelmed, staff. They were cutting off and turning people away, sometimes 10 o'clock in the morning because the volume was so high. So we had to do something, and we created our help center. What was needed? A petition room, document room? No, we had 2 at the time. Now we have 1, right? Public access terminal workstations? No, we already had those set up, but they were behind walls, right? We wanted to get them out to public so public could see them. They weren't designated properly. More A2J, LHI interviews? Yes, but we weren't even using the ones properly that we already had created. Space, we actually cut our space that was being used for all the services that we put into the one help center. We cut the space we were using by half, by 50%. We picked up space by putting everything in one location and moving it to the first floor. More staff, we actually freed up staff because we took people from every different office, combined them in one office. So depending on, when you look at your processes in the courthouse, I mean, you know, like if you're somebody that deals with stuff after a judge does an order, you know, a post-court operating system, they're not doing anything at 9 o'clock in the morning, you know? Some people, like for child support, to file a child support petition in the family court, you got to go to your local support collection unit. So those case types come up a little later. If staff are there to assist those, usually there's quiet times and down times, depending on the function that people do. You combine them and you utilize them 7 hours a day. That's why we were able to free up staff. Money, it didn't cost us anything. It was an old record room space that we just cleaned out the record room space. We got a paint job, and we used everything else, employees and everything else. So our help center is about an 8-room complex. We located it on the first floor, which has been huge for everybody for the fact that it freed up a lot of elevators. We say it's a large waiting room. It's our waiting room seats 64 people. We file over 200, about 230 petitions per day. We also file motions, order, show causes, all agency filings. We are also the waiting room for a courtroom, right? So when somebody sees a judge. We are also the waiting room that after you see a judge and you're waiting for paperwork, you got to pick up your paperwork there. That's 64 people, approximately 600 people come into this help center per day. So with 64, with 7 hours in a workday, 6 seating for 64, we got to make sure, like our slogan here, is under an hour. Everybody who walks in, regardless of what they want, has to be in and out within an hour. It's the only way for the place not to be overwhelmed and the fire department to give us violations. DIY, we put the DIY right in the waiting rooms, the public access terminals. We have 10. We also file Like I said, with all the problems the Bronx has, actually they just did a study. The average 25-year-old male in the South Bronx has an education less than high school. So we hear from a lot of clerks, and we heard for years, that they can't fill out their own form. They can't process their own form. Yet the Bronx County Family Court files more DIY, but not the Bronx Family Court. The population, the people of the Bronx, file more online petitions by themselves than any other court in New York State. So in New York, where everybody's got like above college in New York County education, they actually file less. But the Bronx can file it. Interview rooms for pro bonos. The partners, we pulled in a lot of partners that we had. We wanted to create a great legal service. So we set up 2 small interview rooms that we utilize, and we have a schedule set out for different advocacy agencies or lawyers that do pro bono work or provide volunteer legal services. It's just a quick picture. We put a courtroom, the keys to it, with the terminals that people could use in the local waiting room, and a courtroom located adjacent to the docketing room and the waiting room. Like I said, we file petitions, motions, orders, show causes. You can see a judge or intake the same day basically in the same waiting room without leaving that one location in the courthouse. You can walk in, file your petition, speak to a lawyer, a pro bono lawyer, see a judge, and get your paperwork in that same location, one waiting room. And like I said, the judge sees about 40 to 50 cases per day, and we file over 200 cases. We also did the record rooms on a different floor. Instead of sending people away, we basically let them ask. If they look just requesting a copy of a court order, any court order, we can give it to them from that waiting room also. We also installed Wi-Fi. We created our own infomercials, something we call photo novellas. We created videos just with local staff, and we all posted and run it on a TV screen. And we did institute language line. The one thing we do is we do have staff interpreters that speak Spanish, which is a primary language in the Bronx. They work our counters. So they were trained to work the counters and do simple questions. Results, we totally improved court efficiency. Since July 2013, they have turned nobody away in this help center with all that volume. Nobody's been turned away. Previously, 1 or 2 days a week, they were turning people away at 10 o'clock in the morning. Right? Nobody's been turned away. We increased filings, in particular, self-rep filings, and I don't know if it's as a consequence or whatever. Bronx also had the most children in foster care. That was 5,000 children in foster care, just in that one county of the Bronx years ago. By increasing it, we increased, over the past couple of years, we've increased custody visitation filings by over 50%. We file over 16 now, 16,000. It used to be 10,000. So now, so I don't know if that's consequential or what, but it helps. We increased the DIY, LHI interviews, and we reduced waiting times. Like I said, it's on average it's an hour. If we don't do it under an hour, it will collapse. The people will just be out the doorway. Yeah, actually, when we did it, a lot of people said it can't be done. Nobody can do it. There's too many people in one area, too many responsibilities in one area. So we brought the staff in. We closed the old way we did things on a Friday, brought some staff in on the weekend. They all volunteered. Nobody got overtime. Unions don't know about it. But they came in and they fixed it up, set up the place. Monday morning was open. Everybody thought it was a quiet day. When we looked at the numbers and ran the numbers, that was the busiest Monday in 2013 that we had. The staff thought it was an easy day and a light day, and that's the only reason it worked. Some of the things we did is we have a family court volunteer lawyer project, which is overseen by Judge Fisher. This started in 2006. It's a great program for lawyers. And, we're in New York City, so lawyers aren't a problem, to tell you the truth, finding them. But what we did with this is it started with 6 law firms, 30 lawyers. It is now going on its 10th year anniversary. We have 43 law firms or corporations, like Pfizer and a bunch of other corporations are now involved, and over 400 attorneys. We've expanded it to do video to counties in New York State that don't have access to lawyers or law schools or law firms. So those little counties that border the Canadian border can Skype in with an attorney that's sitting in the Bronx or New York or Brooklyn. In 2014, last year alone, 2,700 litigants sat with a pro bono lawyer to get a free consultation in one of the New York City family courts. Another project we started. Years ago, I was a court officer when I started. One of the worst things I ever did, I had to pick up a phone call from an elderly person saying they're homebound. Their son is beating on them, stole their teeth, stealing their money, stole their TV to sell it for crack. What was it you could do? You got to file a petition. You're going to tell this person, you have to file a petition. You got to come down to court. You're going to have to file a petition. You got to see a judge to get this protected. It was the worst. What we all did, advocates would call us. We would call advocates. We'd refer everybody's number. NYPD would get the number. They would call us, say what everybody punted. That's what we did. We got tired of punting a couple years ago. So what we did is in New York State, there's an elder agency that's contracted for each county to do home visits. What we did was based on an online program, we allow this person to file a petition. We got an advocacy agency that will review the petition, and the person can call from a hospital bed, from a shelter, or from their home, if they're homebound or mobility challenged, elderly or mobility challenged, and the judge will either take it telephonically or by video if they have a laptop and Skype. Contract with the sheriff, basically, who will serve and remove the person. This is now available in all the counties in New York City. New York City is a very small and very easy place to get around within the counties. The geography of New York City is probably a fraction of most large cities. Also, when you think about it, custody visitation. The guy I was flying on a plane with lives in Cincinnati, right? So he said it's hard to fly into Cincinnati, so he comes into Louisville to drive up an hour. It's about an hour drive from here. But I was thinking, a 30-year-old man that lives in Kentucky that wants visitation with his child that lives in Cincinnati, by statute, federal and every state statute, can actually do that by phone. But yet an elderly person that's the victim of abuse, that can't get out of bed, that's on dialysis, that's sick, or just can't get to a courthouse, you know, can't even ask for a protective order from home. That quarter of a mile is as much as 400 miles to that person, to the courthouse. So it was something that we always punted that we had to change. And thankfully, this program changed, and it expanded to all the counties in New York City. I just went through that. This one's really exciting. This is domestic violence. I've been with the family court, the New York Unified Court System in New York State for 25 years. These projects that started 25 years ago, they're still projects today. All right? Some pilot projects that they start never expand. This pilot project, if anybody started a pilot project or been part of a pilot project, this started in March of 2013. We started this out of the Bronx County Family Court. And it expanded to each of the 62 counties in New York State within 16 months. It was available in all 62 counties in New York State. It was the fastest pilot project I've ever seen. Basically, the domestic violence advocate will fill out a petition via the LHI site, which is all the pro bono net site that hosts all the online interviews. They'll create a petition, the advocate. That petition, all that information will sit in the storage area of family court. And when a person walks in with the petition, we just have to accept it, so we no longer have to do data entry. It can be done any day or time. It takes a litigant, actually, when a litigant walks in with this petition that was created by an advocate, they actually, out of the courthouse, because all the clerk has to do, it sits in the storage area in our case management system. All the clerk has to do is highlight it. It does a fuzzy logic search to see if there's even a history, so we know if there's any court history anywhere in New York State. Prior to even looking at it, it does that behind the scenes. All the clerk has to do is accept it. If they hit the accept button, it just comes over automatically, and basically there's no data entry. It takes 20 minutes to get an order of protection when it's filed this way. I mean, that's walking out the door, walking in, seeing a judge, and walking out the door with a copy of a protective order. Since inception, like I said, it's actually 9,000 petitions are filed now. Why do we need it? It's 68,000 family offense petitions were filed in New York State family courts last year. Like I said, we're almost 10,000. That short period of time, in 1 year, 10,000 cases were filed using this method. Actually, that's a significant number because it was so popular that the advocate agencies wanted it. So basically, it was a comprehensive, and where it was a tech issue, it's now an access to justice issue for the fact that it started clerks talking to their legal service providers in the domestic violence agencies. They had to talk, and with the training, we had to train both court clerks and chief clerks, and we had to train advocacy agencies. So we designated one major advocacy agency in each county. We started training their staff. We trained clerks from each county, and it was over 400 advocates or caseworkers, social workers were trained from advocacy agencies, and hundreds of clerks. The nice thing I'm just missing here, this is all out of whack. Funding for this project. Now, the Elder Abuse Project cost absolutely nothing, zero. I mean, basically, the Help Center created, a paint job and fixing it up. We used the same, furniture, computers, staffing. This actually was a grant funded from the Department of Justice, which I think Catherine wants to mention later, right? Or something? No? Wow, I think something's out now. But it was a VAWA grant, stop grant, basically, that funded this project. And all it was to get us a couple of programs, New York State, a couple of programs, to create an interface or a bridge with Pro Bono Net, where these interviews are hosted. The bridge was created. The exciting news about this was the money's used to do this. Once the bridge is created, you know, it's easy enough to add another lane, actually. So the bridge is created. So UCMS, or our case management system, and Pro Bono Net now talk to each other, and they share information. Ultimately, we're going to look to put other case types. One area we're looking at now is actually the modification of child support, which is a significant number of filings, and it's the #1 filed petition in New York State on the Pro Bono Net site. We're going to try to interface those to come over, working the same way, because they're not going directly e-filed until a clerk will look at it, review it, substantiate what's in there before they accept that information over. So that's our next step with it. Basically, advocates, like I said, they create a hot doc interview, they create the petition. The nice thing about it, too, is we created multiple forms depending on what the person needs, including the elder abuse case. So if an elder abuse case comes in, they can click that, the advocate or the attorney, and it will come over and actually generate that form also. Litigant goes to the clerk's office, signs and files. Just to show you, it goes through the Pro Bono Net LHI site, just links right to it. They create the petition. One of the petitions is nice. It's also the only multi-disciplinary case type, because these are the questions. What we did is in New York State, you can go to criminal court when family court's not in session. And somebody can go to an advocate's office and fill this out any day, any time during the week. And it will sit there until they want to come to the family court. This will create an affidavit for criminal court, so the person can generate, if they go in on a Friday night, family court's closed to Monday, but they need that order protection, the advocate attorney can generate an affidavit for criminal court to petition for family court, so the person can go to 2 different courts and get that either temporary order protection out of the criminal court and then come over to the family court. The mobility challenge. And the niceness is we created this just to let you know, everybody's seen those A2J forms probably, you know, with the really nice avatar-based, gently, you know, brings you to the next question. This one we knew was strictly for advocates and lawyers. So we just did it strictly in the hot docs interview base, because we knew an advocate doesn't want all those, or somebody that's doing this every day doesn't want all those screens. So we wanted to streamline it, which they love. So again, depending on if you hit yes to a certain question, it opened. If you said this person is mobility challenged or elderly, this will prompt to ask you, what day do you want to come in? What time can you call in? Are you going to call in, video in, or is the person coming in? Because one thing we also did with the elders when it comes to domestic violence and other case types, we try to give them time certains, that's starting times and ending times. You know, because courts aren't usually very comfortable. They don't have Marriott-style benches in the courthouses. We got wood or metal benches. So if even if you're on dialysis or you got pains coming into a courthouse, if you have to wait 5 hours, it's really like inhumane sometimes, or whatever it is. So we can schedule it. If they can come in, they'll schedule it, they call it at a certain time, and it's over at a certain time. Petitions instructions are all personalized. Everybody gets one. This is just our e-share resident case management system. So actually, all that information comes over, so we can highlight it for each party, each child that comes in. We get all that information. We can go, we can edit it, we can change it, we can do whatever, and then all we have to do is accept it, and it's filed. We partner with everybody. I said that. The benefits, everybody's filling out. There's lots of benefits going on. The court forms are better. Before, some people were getting, judges were getting handwritten forms. And when somebody has a lot to say, I don't know if you ever give a hard copy to the person, they'll write on the sides. They put arrows to write behind the paper. That's all gone when they use this. It's all typed. It's a good petition. Faster adjudications, like I said, streamlined the process, allowed us to do more. I mean, these were people that we had to deal with at counters. Not deal with, but we had to handle and help them at counters. We had to help them process their petitions, get them into court. It's all done now automatically. By them doing this, actually, we file about 10 a day now. In the Bronx are filed by advocates, and normally we file about 35 orders of protection, domestic violence petitions a day. So a third of them are now being filed by advocates, meaning that they're not even coming to court staff to actually do anymore. That allowed the court staff to actually do different case types or help other people. 20 minutes? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm too much on. Like I said, over 9,000 petitions were filed since inception. 9,000, that's a very short time. I mean, for 9,000 petitions to be filed. Well, also, Judge Fisher wants to expand it now. It was only to domestic violence agencies and advocates, and it was only the primary domestic violence agency advocates in each county. Now she wants to expand it to legal service providers, other legal service providers, and other domestic violence agencies. So, and like I said, it created uniformity of DV practice. You get to some counties, and we're all familiar with states, one county does it, one judge does something different than another judge. This was forced. They were forced to accept things. You know, we have restrictions where some judges didn't abide by, didn't want it in the petition. Some criminal courts didn't want to take where the statute allows a person to go there on a Friday or Saturday night, said they don't want to take orders of protection. Now they have to take them because somebody's filing a petition for it. So it's really, and the expansion of the other case types is getting great. Thank you, and thank you.
We have questions we want to give them the microphone.
Any questions? Yes.
Hold on.
Yeah, we're being recorded, so we'd like to get the questions on the mic. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about your technology. How were you able to obtain workstations and computers, and also do you have any tech support for the pro se litigants who are at either of your facilities?
There's very limited. I mean, we have clerks available nearby if it's a simple question for tech support. I mean, when we created the DIY, we looked at it. We had them out before, and what we did was centralize the computers in one area. So all the machines print to a printer behind the scenes. Because initially when we had a printer next to the DIY machine, you were out there 4 or 5 times a day to either refill the paper, unclog a jam, or whatever it was, or somebody, you know, a child playing with it or pulling out the drawer open. So actually now they print behind the petition, behind the counter where somebody will come and just docket it. So they're called just to sign and get their date. Tech support, we have tech support. It's actually a court officer, to tell you the truth. In our help center, he'll help somebody sign on. The hardest problem, the biggest problem people usually have with doing an online petition is actually getting to the electronic interview. Because the LHI, those front pages, the initial pages that you got to do and accept the terms, they're a little difficult to navigate for some people, you know. But otherwise, once they're online, they just go through it. Anything else? Thank you. What?
I want to ask a question of you both. In both of your examples, or in your offices, you let the people come behind the counter. There is not that glass window that normally people are served from. Could you talk about if you had to go through a transition in your court culture to let people in the back, and then any security or training things that you had to do?
We actually did not have a transition in culture. We had very few windows that had the bulletproof glass. Our front customer service counter is just out there. So that actually was a security identifier on a security report, but we didn't really change that. We did do we installed panic buttons so that, you know, just like at the bank, our on-site security team would then respond, and we also did some security training with the staff before we opened.
Yeah, we didn't have an issue. We treat our help center as a public office, so public can walk behind there anytime. We also, in New York City, we're kind of unique, and I know some people may say or have a problem with it because of the information advice thing. We have staff that act as scribes. So if we type every petition that walks into our help center, or every application that somebody's filing. So if somebody wants to walk in, our case management system actually creates our documents in our petitions also. So if they can't fill out an online form, it may take them a little longer, but if they can't fill out an online form, or it's not an online form, if they walk into our help center, we will have staff actually type that petition up for them. So, I mean, public are in there all the time, and staff is very familiar with the staff. They wanted to put the glass up, but, you know, I mean, to me, I mean, they actually were going to pay for it, you know, and put up glass walls when we open this help center, cover the counter. But, you know, I mean, I've been in a couple places that have it. I think, especially in a family court, I mean, to me, people are telling them you're the most intimate secrets of their life, and to have them to tell it between a glass or a little speaker while there's people behind them, sitting behind them. I mean, they walk into they come into a family court, they go through magnetometers in most courts, I believe, at least in New York. You know, they're wanded, then they have to tell you the most, you know, the most intimate secrets of their entire life. They basically have to tell a clerk, and force that person to tell it while somebody may be standing on line behind them or sitting in a chair next to them, and have to scream it when you put up those glass walls. You know, I mean, I don't care what color the wall is, or if it's opaque or clear. I mean, it's still a wall. You know, and have somebody do that. We didn't go for that. I mean, we allowed. We're a help center. You know, I think even designating the name of what you have as either a clerk's office or docketing office takes that formality out of it, and just a help center says that's basically, that's your purpose, that's your goal, to help people. So we didn't have any issues. I mean, we had some, but not many. Yes.
So when you're talking about providing that level of assistance where you have staff sitting down, maybe helping people type or talking to them about those most intimate subjects, are those staff attorneys?
No.
And then so they're not attorneys. So you have no concern at all about the establishment of an attorney-client relationship or confidentiality?
Nope, they're non-attorneys. They're all, with the attorneys available, actually, we have the volunteer lawyers available that they can sit and consult with prior to filing a document or a petition. But actually, our court staff act as scribes, basically. One good thing that New York State has is we have unified forms. So all our forms, family court forms, are unified throughout all our courts, family courts. So it's basically filling in the blank. I mean, we do provide training, which is always difficult, about that information advice. Mm-hmm. And like we tell people, you know, if Superman comes in and wants to file against Lois Lane, the judge is going to see a petition, Superman versus Lois Lane, you know, because they're not allowed to turn anybody away in New York State in family court from filing. Yes.
It's being live streamed, yeah.
Did you have a lot of pushback from any of your judges? I know you said you had some internal conflict, so I'm assuming it came.
Yeah, we actually had, well, it wasn't just judges. We had internal conflicts from some of our administrators and managers. So the family division in Pittsburgh was divided really into 3 sections, which was ultimately a Venn diagram, which with one of the administrators kind of just overlapping on the territory of the other 2. So it was just fraught with issues anyway. But so we had, of course, some alliances, judicial and administrator alliances. And so when I say I had internal conflicts, those were the ones I had. That they were, you know, administrators that didn't want their piece of the Venn diagram kind of made smaller. So this operation was somewhat out of that diagram, or you could say it was the big circle that put all 3 circles inside of it.
So once the judges saw and everybody else saw the benefits of the program, did
Yeah.
they kind of jump on board?
Absolutely. I mean, it certainly still took some time. Nobody ever likes to be proven wrong. But yeah, it did take a little bit of time. But really what it was they saw less clients in their courtroom arguing about their cases because they had that opportunity to be a part of the case, of their own case, up front. And they had that ability to tell that story to someone. And really that was the service that we provided most, was being able to listen to this person's issues. Because a lot of times they come in at the peak of their emotional, you know, their emotional issue, and they just need to lay it out there. So, and they were no longer doing that in the courtroom, and that helped with a lot of the judges. Yeah, the fact that the repurposing of the staff, we only repurposed 6 people, so to double the amount of staff we were seeing was just amazing, and so that really wasn't a huge deal for the territorial issue on the administrators as well. That was all I was allowed to have. I wasn't getting any more.
With our elder project, we had some judges that didn't want to do it by you know, electronically or via video, you know. But I mean, like we had administrative or supervising judges say you have to do it this way. But just the way some things work, it's weird because just before the legislature in New York State closed for the summer, basically they just passed a bill in New York State to allow for a pilot project in the Bronx County for elder domestic violence in order to testify and do their hearing proceedings off-site via telephonically or video. Even though we've been doing it for years anyway, I mean, the legislature's catching up anyway, and they approved it, and the governor just signed off on it. So now, actually, they're mandated to do it in the Bronx and Erie County now.
Thank you very much. We're at time, and we really appreciate you joining us. And I encourage you to get involved with SRLN and share your ideas. Thank you.